have a think first of all. What is your briefly? What's your relationship to Silverburn? Just in a nutshell. We're going to go into detail with that a lot later. What is your relationship with Silverburn?
That's a difficult one, because my relationship with Silverburn is that it was the home of my grandfather and my grandmother. So my memories go back to when I was young. But more recently, it's trying to protect it for the future, because I have my father sitting on my right shoulder reminding me that Silverburn has to be kept for the people of Fife and for, in particular, the people of Leven. And so since my father died and my mother died, I have felt sort of duty bound to help protect it.
Can you think about your own childhood memories of Silverburn, the part of the mill, whatever? I mean, there's a whole, we could break it down if you like. Can you paint us a picture of maybe what the mill was like as you were doing before?
The mill, did you say?
The mill itself, going into the mill, you were talking about being in your best clothes and sneaking in there.
At Silverburn, do you mean?
Yes.
But I never thought of it as a mill. I thought of it as going to see Granny and Grandad. And the fun we would have, even though we had to be on our best behaviour, because it was Granny and Grandad. And so there was a lot of fun there with my sisters and my cousins, running around the lawn and running down to where the flax mill was, feeding Dobbin the horse, running down the little narrow lane then, which went down to the beach. So we played on the beach a lot, which people sort of forget about after a long time. They sort of forgot that you could get down to the beach. I mean, the beach went for miles. There was never anybody on it. So it was a fun day out, but we had to be on our best behaviour. That was, I think, the main thing.
Tell me about sneaking in and what you saw when you snuck into the place and you climbed up the stairs. Tell me about it.
There were certain places that were off limits. The so-called retting pond, I say so-called because we're not sure if it was a retting pond, but that was a sort of danger area. So of course we immediately went there, wanted to go there. And then in the actual, where the flax mill itself, I don't remember it, although I remember it being a flax mill or being called a flax mill, but we weren't allowed to go into the dirty bits where they kept machinery, I presume. And I do remember behind some big doors there was some old, I presume Grandad's carriages for horses, some small ones, quite narrow, more like a sort of pony and trap. In fact, I think I remember a pony and trap there, now that I think about it, being used along that lower road. But I do remember that there was a squash court behind all that. And I don't think we were really meant to go there. Do you want me to remove my dog?
Probably, yeah. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Is that okay?
And I can just pick her up and put her in the kitchen. But fondly, because it was a naughty thing to do, going with my sisters up at behind where the flax mill was, there was a squash court, and we weren't really meant to go in there. And we used to sneak in this rather dusty bit of doors and up a small narrow staircase to a sort of gallery area where you could sit and, I presume, watch squash being played, though I don't ever remember squash being played. I never saw any squash being played. So we would just be naughty and going up there because we weren't meant to be there doing that on our own. So that was another thing. There was also Corrimar, the house, which is now sadly in a state of disrepair, to say the least. But it was lived in by my aunt Sheila and Uncle Edward for, I don't know how long, maybe a year or two, with their children. So we used to play around Corrimar as well. And then we did things that children do, like climb trees and play hide and seek, and just generally had fun.
Do you have any memory? Somebody's mentioned this, of a revolving summer house.
Ah, yes, of course I do.
Tell us. No,
No, but it's in the film. It's in the film.
It's actually.
No, it's because it was moved. So there was a beautiful old, I don't know, we didn't really call it a summer house, but I guess it was a summer house. And it was on obviously a sort of revolving disc at the bottom. And it had a little, it's like going into sort of fairyland. It had a little door and you could go in, and we would all giggle and laugh. And my granddad, Sir David Russell, would push. I remember him pushing us round. And it went round quite slowly. It wasn't very fast. But we all thought it was great fun. Absolutely wonderful. And that was at Silverburn. But later, it was moved to my parents' house. And it was there at the back there for us. And I think it's still there. It's still there today.
When was it moved?
It must have been moved after Granny died. So Granddad died in 1956, and Granny died not long after him, and then I presume Silverburn was left for a while my father decided what to do with it. A lot of the furniture came to Rossi, and that must have been when it must have been dismantled and moved. I was born at Rossi, the house, so that probably would have been in the late 50s, I would think. No, because I was quite young at Rossi when I remember it being there, and it might even been there that in my memory I see Grandad pushing it round when he came to see us at Rossi. So I don't actually know when it was moved, and I think it's still.
Where's Rossi?
So Rossi is where I was born, and that's about 1.5 miles outside Auchtermuchty.
Right.
So when we went to Silverburn, we would drive through Cooper and go that way down to Silverburn. It's just a fond memory I have of, we were very little girls, and we loved getting into, because we weren't allowed to get into it very often, but getting into the summer house that had a sort of metal turning thing below it, and Grandad pushing his shoulder to get it moving, because it was a heavy thing. It needed probably a few of them just to get it going, and when you got it going, we were all giggling and laughing inside, just loving it.
Wonderful.
I was going to say, can you describe what the inside of Corrimar was like?
I don't remember much about the inside of Corrimar. I remember playing around it, but I don't remember much. I clearly remember the inside of Silverburn.
What was the inside of Silverburn House like? What are your memories of
It's
how did it feel when you went in?
It's Grandad. Silverburn House to me is Grandad. It's the memories of him, and I have to explain that more, because he had as a grandfather, he was a very gentle man, very kind, gentle, soft man. He spoke very softly. and he had something about him that made you want to go to him. I can't explain it, but a lot of people felt that about him. He had a sort of charisma, a gentleness about him. He was also a very spiritual man, and I don't know if it's because when he was young, I think when he was in his teens and then later in his 20s, he had, I think, altogether 3 breakdowns that affected him hugely for the rest of his life. I think he mentions them himself in his own books. So peace was something to him that was very, very important. And even as children, I remember that he and my father also followed in these footsteps. Rather than, there was times of laughing and joking and giggling and, you know, but there were also times of just sitting and being quiet, which may sound very odd for children. So you would go into Granddad's study in Silverburn, and he would just be sitting, and he'd ask us all just to sit quietly, and we would. And it was like, now looking back on it, it was a sort of form of meditation, something to calm us down maybe before we all went in for the lunch or something. But I do remember that.
What about the hospital that was in the grounds, which is on the maps? Is it Stratham? There's an outpatient department of
Stratheden Hospital. Stratheden Hospital. I don't remember anything about. But you know, there were other bits of Silverburn that I don't remember. But I know what happened there. You know, that there were a lot of Polish soldiers that were helped there in the hospital. I remember that, but I didn't know where the hospital was. Where were they?
We're trying to investigate that and finding it quite difficult. What about the cottages? Do you have any memories of the cottages?
Fun.
Paint us an anecdote. Let's see it.
Well, because there were lots of people there. So the little line of cottages that were opposite the flax mill were a place of fun. There were families living there and children. And we were children, so we all, I presume, just played together and had fun there together. But specifically, there was one that was for the gardener, and I think there might have been one that was for, I was about to say the groom, but that would mean the days of when there were more horses, and I presume at some time there must have been more horses there.
So you were allowed to roam wherever you wanted?
Yes. As long as we didn't get too dirty.
So you talked beautifully about your granddad, and you painted a really lovely picture of your granddad. Have you got any stories that have been handed down about your great-granddad, about David Russell? Does anything come down about what he was like? Did your grandparents talk about him?
I don't remember my grandparents talking about him, but I remember my dad talking about him.
Yes.
And so, Dad, it was about the horses. He was a great horseman. In fact, I remember Uncle Robert, that's Granddad's brother. He was a great horseman as well. But great-granddad was meant to be able to tame wild animals. This seemed very exciting to us when we heard the stories of, what do you mean, like bears? You know, and Dad said, no, not bears. But horses, he had this knack of being able to ride horses that nobody else could ride. And he was once offered a horse for free. It was somewhere in the north of Fife on a farm. No one could get near this animal. And apparently, great-granddad went marching in, even though he was warned he might get killed, tried to do so, walked up to the horse, put a bridle on it and a saddle, and rode it home. So those sort of stories are just sort of odd. But we all, as children, loved horses, and we had ponies ourselves. So that was something that sort of linked us.
Was there anything, was there any talk of the original flax mill? Did anybody talk to you about what the flax mill itself was like when it was working? I know it was 1888 was the sort of last time, but was anything, no, not really.
There was very little. It was just those are the bits that we weren't allowed to go in. So there was, they didn't want it to make us more inquisitive. We were rather kept out of that.
Do you think your grandfather's, I was going to say, need for peace and that idea of just being quiet in a space, do you think that was reflected in how the park was as well? Was that part
Absolutely.
of, you know...
As far as I understand it now, after he had these breakdowns, he must have had help. And I know after the last one, he was sent off to Russia, to a sort of asylum sort of place, somewhere, I think it was in the woods, so it was somewhere peaceful. And when he came back, he did a lot more research into trees, gardening and plants. And that was always of great interest. And he loved two things. He loved clouds and trees were his passion. And in St Anne's University Library, there are something like 20,000 photographs that Grandad took. That's an awful lot of photographs. And some of them were of Silverburn, some of them were family photographs, but there are an awful lot of hundreds and hundreds of just clouds or trees. So he must have found some peace and tranquility in either looking at them or being surrounded by them, both at Silverburn and on the Isle of Iona. That was his place to be at peace. And he first went to Iona in, I think in the 1888, 1890, and kept on going back there, and then bought a house there in 1930. So that place and the peace of it and the peace he found at Silverburn were hugely important to him. And he transferred that to the next generation and the next generation. That need for peace.
That's wonderful.
How did that process of transferring the need for peace, how do you think that, was it just because of his example, or how did that occur?
Well, as I said to you a little while ago, that inside Silverburn he had a study, and I remember it well, and he had a lovely blue chair that he would sit on. And when we were all there as children, there was quite a lot of us as children. So I was one of 4 girls. So even if it was just our family running around, and he was by that time quite an elderly man, but we were quiet around him because he sort of exuded that. I can't express it better than that. Rather, like I said, he had this sort of charismatic man. But even as you see him, the pictures of him, he had this sort of gentleness about him. He was very anti-war, a pacifist, but allowed both his sons to go to war. Didn't stop them when they wanted to go and signed up. And then one was killed, and that I think also must have had a huge effect, losing a son. And another, his second son was killed, and his first son was very badly wounded. And I think that must affect any parent hugely. Going through that and the loss, and family being very, very important to him. Another memory, I think I'm missing something here with Grandad, is that he was a very, very spiritual man. It wasn't just about peace. He was on a kind of long-term search for something, and I don't know if he ever found it. But he was fascinated by Buddhists. We found, and I honestly don't know where it is now, but when we were clearing out my father's house, Rossi, we found the Silverburn visitor's book. One of my sisters may have it. I certainly haven't got it. And in that we found extraordinary people who'd been and stayed during the 40s and 50s at Silverburn. There were some Buddhist monks. Where he met them or how he did, I don't know. He was a great believer in Christianity, but also in exploring other religions. And he was part of the, what's it called, the Philosophy? No, the society in Edinburgh. Not philosophy, not that.
Theophysical?
No.
Do you want us to find that? Stop and find out the name? Or
The philosophy, it must be in Grandad's, anyway, he was part of that in Edinburgh, and they were not spiritualists as such, but they were a small group of people who got together and talked about spiritual things. Also in the visitor's book, which is quite extraordinary for his time, was that somebody called Krishnamurti stayed there more than once. And I've been fascinated by Krishnamurti, and it's affected my life and my sisters and my father, not my mother. She didn't believe in any of that. But Krishnamurti was an extraordinary man. And to know that he stayed at Silverburn is just another aspect of my grandfather that I didn't know. I didn't know that then. But it does sort of explain the feeling around him of definitely a spiritually aware man. Definitely.
we're finding out so much that we didn't know here, and this painting of the picture is wonderful. What I suggest we do is we just continue, and we'll return.
So what I was trying to get at, although he was a businessman and he made paper, his whole philosophy about even that was different. He wanted to look after the workers. He wanted to make them happy. He wanted to make sure that when they retired, they had houses to live in, and he organised that. He built houses at Cadham, near Markinch, which is, I've got a piece of one of the trees that they had to fell at Cadham to build the houses for the retired workers.
Do you think his father had the same attitudes towards the workers?
My father?
No, your great-great-grandfather, the original David Russell.
I know very little about him.
No.
And also I don't know why Grandad had a nervous breakdown, and why he had 3 or 2 even, or 1. Why? He seemed to have everything going for him, yet there was something in him that obviously was quite disturbed.
So, moving to Silverburn, the whole project, which is the park, the mill, and this whole project that's going on, which you've been... What has your part been in the whole Silverburn project? What role have you played in that?
to me it's very important to continue what my father wanted, which is that Silverburn remains available to people for free, to go there, to go for walks, to walk the dogs, to sit on the bench, look at the trees, to just enjoy the peace and tranquility that you find at Silverburn. It's definitely a place of quietness and not noisiness, maybe apart from during the music festival they have there.
What about the there's very clear remit in terms of mental health and people coming, and marvellous volunteers moving
Yes.
through to taking. How do you think that is fitting into yours and your father's vision?
I'm just delighted, because one of the times I went round, I think it was with Brian Robertson when he was there, and what a lovely man he was. We were about to go into the so-called walled garden, and there were a group of men there, and he asked if I could be introduced, and they were from, I don't even know the name of the charity, but they were ex-soldiers who'd had some kind of trauma. Some were from Afghanistan, some had been, well, I don't even know where they'd been to in the world, but they were ex-army. And they were so traumatised they couldn't face even getting a job. And they came and volunteered at Silverburn once a week, I think it was, doing quite simple jobs just to be able to function again. And I thought, yes, this is exactly what Grandad would love. He would love it. And Dad, my father, because he lost a leg and went through the terrible trauma of that. So seeing that in action just made me feel, oh God, I'm so proud. I'm just so proud. And that's what I feel about what's happening now at Silverburn, is pride in that they've accomplished everything that my grandfather and father would have wished.
What's important to you personally?
Silverburn.
Yes, the whole project, the renewal of Silverburn and so on.
Because Dad's sitting on my shoulder.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that it's very important for me, people. And the people that surrounded Silverburn were loved by my grandfather and my father, and by me. There have been times after my father died when Silverburn has been threatened. I'm not blaming anyone, it just that there were times when financially it wasn't supported, it didn't have enough funds to support it, and it could have been sold, it could have disappeared completely. And I felt then my father and grandfather saying, Cecilia, get out there and save it. It's meant to be saved. And it could have vanished. It could have been built on. Well, there were various things. I maybe shouldn't mention what it could have been, but one was that it could be bought and used as a crematorium. And they would use the flax mill as the crematorium. And I had to put my head above the parapet then. And there were a few articles in Fife Herald about that one, I think. You may not want to put that in the film, by the way.
Again, you can see if you don't. I think that's incredible.
Can I just?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
Does the legacy sit heavily on you?
Yes.
Would you like to expand on that?
It doesn't. The legacy of Silverburn sits heavily on me but not so much now because I know that it's safe. But before, when there were times when it could have gone, then all the good things that happened there would have also gone. And, you know, one time I remember driving in, and I had suggested, I think then, to Brian Robertson, you know, the lovely fields where the horse is. What on earth you did with that? Why didn't you make some allotments? Get some people in there. And the next time I came, there were allotments being built, and that's just such a joy to see that the local people have got interest and are enjoying what is a wonderful gift, which is the joy of walking around Silverburn Park.
Is there anything in the wider sense that is really what the project is really important for the community, in terms of the local towns, in terms of just perhaps how people feel about the place generally in the wider sense? What is this project doing in terms of the wider community, and how possibly people elsewhere see it?
I think probably the engaging of people's interest, young and old, doesn't matter who they are, but the fact that there's a flax mill on that site and it's the last one in Scotland has to mean something. It just has to. It mustn't disappear. I mean, so many of the old industries in Scotland have gone, and there's no history of them kept. And they were just torn down and rebuilt and used for a different purpose. So I think to have the flax mill somehow reinterpreted, rebuilt, and therefore educate the people of Scotland and people of England everywhere, just to engage them in that education of an industry that has gone, that could be reintroduced. You know, you could have linen mills again. It might become a new industry in Scotland, who knows?
I think you put this question in. What do you think would have happened if you basically lost the flax mill, if this project hadn't been started, if it wasn't going to be there? What would have happened?
There were times I thought it was going to be demolished. I would go there, I saw Corrimar disintegrating, and I saw the flax mill becoming decidedly dangerous, and you could see bricks falling down, and I thought, oh my God, somebody's going to come and bulldoze it, and it's going to be too dangerous, so they have to knock it down. And how sad is that? It's just a part of history, a part of Silverburn that's just could have been saved and hasn't been saved. That's what I was frightened of, yeah.
Do you view Silverburn as a part of you?
Absolutely.
Tell me about that.
Because it's a part of my family's history, my history and my family's life in Fife, and our history of paper making, and before that the flax mill. It's just part of the family.
How do you see the future? You're waiting to ask a question here.
No, I'm thinking.
How do you see Silverburn in 10 years' time, or how would you like to see it in 10 years' time? Given what's going on now.
Full of joy,
Could you start it off?
Okay.
To bring us into it, maybe. I'd like you for 10 years' time.
If the future runs as I would hope, I would see a rebuilt flax mill on the site of the flax mill, with a learning centre, with an educational centre, with lots of local people being employed there, hopefully, and schools going there, primary schools, getting a taste of what that was like, both the flax mill part and the Silverburn part. And then maybe all the children running along and having a picnic on the beach. That would make me very happy.
What I would like you to do is talk about the desk that you're sitting in front of.
Yes. Right.
No.
Tell us, yeah, desk and chair.
So, this is Grandad's desk, and Grandad's chair, and I feel part of Grandad. I do when I sit in it, and it sat at Cecilia Russell for many years. I don't know when it was moved, but I think it was at Silverburn, and then it was moved to Roth's house, which was at Cecilia Russell. I got it from there. I got this moved at great expense from Roth's house when the mill closed, or rather when the mill was starting to close, and they were emptying Roth's house. And I just love this old desk. It's got beautiful bits that pull out for writing on, and this is that it has a sort of special feel. It must be horsehair or something under the leather, but it's very comfortable to sit in, and it reminds me of my father sitting here and my grandfather sitting here.